Hello, everyone. Welcome to an awesome episode of On the Record to kick off 2019. Hopefully, 2019 will be a much better year for us Bitcoiners than 2018 was with the bear market. And I can't wait to introduce my guest for this episode. And a lot of you have asked for him to come on the show. So please welcome to the show, Murad Mahmudov. Thank you so much for joining me. I believe you are across the pond on the other side of the world, right?
Indeed, I am back home in Azerbaijan at the moment. And I would like to thank you for inviting me to the show. A big fan myself. Thank you for what you're doing, providing constant analysis and entertainment for us all. But yeah, super excited to be here, man.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for definitely thanks for joining. To be honest, I ran across your work only recently because I tend to be like in my own world. And when I started looking at it, reviewed a couple of the videos and interviews that you've done, I was very impressed. So very happy to have you on. And hey, thanks. Thanks for joining. How was, are you in Baku, Azerbaijan or somewhere else?
I am, yes, in Baku.
Oh, great, man. Beautiful city. I can't wait to go visit one day. Might even go there this year. It's like one of the cities on my bucket list. So I definitely want to go. All right, I'm not gonna waste much time. Let's briefly talk about you a little bit. Again, I'm a little bit new to your work. How did you come into this space? I mean, you're pretty young. You were a recent college graduate, correct?
Indeed. I graduated in 2017, actually. So I did a year abroad in China during the previous bubble. So like late 2013, early 2014, I was there. And so like that's how I got into Bitcoin first. Like I had a lot of like Russian, American, Chinese friends there who were involved, went to a couple of Beijing meetups. So kind of been in the space ever since. And particularly 2016, 2017 onwards, I started getting more active.
Who was running those? Was like, I know Jake was pretty popular over there in Beijing around 2013, 2014.
The Bcash guy?
Well, he's a Bcash guy now, right? Back
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
back then we were all like,
Yeah.
Bitcoin maximalists, right?
Yeah, he was a pretty good friend of mine while I was there.
Yeah, no, I got along with him as well. Met him back in Hong Kong in like 2014 days. I think Daniel Prey, the creator of Hyperledger, was out there as well. And man, trying to think of who else. There's one more. I already forgot. Anyway, all right, cool. So you were studying there, and then you finished your degree in New Jersey, in Princeton, right?
I did indeed.
And what you study?
Yeah, I studied Chinese and minored in finance. So kind of always wanted to bring those two together. Like mostly did finance, like econ stuff. Essentially just was doing more and more the crypto stuff as I was nearing graduation, and just really happy to be like diving head in as of late. I know you're very critical of like hedge funds and VCs in the space, but I'm actually starting one launching in February. But it's going to be like more trading oriented. No shit coins, no ICOs, nothing like that. So
You know what? I definitely want to talk about that. I mean, man, that's to be honest, man. Like I don't even want to start a hedge fund, and I've been in that industry. Like that, you're doing it right out of college, man. I hope you have some really good partners that have experience in a hedge fund world. I mean, I am one of my friends that we learned trading together. We're finally going to start open like a family office. But we're not going to take in outside money, just our money, our close friends, our relatives. I mean, they barely trust us, and we've been profitably trading for like 10 years, right? And like it's an interesting space. It's a really interesting space. Okay, hey, so as you came up through the last bull market, so who were some of the people that you really looked up to that helped guide you into, because pretty soon you're already probably starting to feel it, right? Everyone wants an interview with you. You're starting to have less time to do your own research. And more time devoted to your fans, and eventually like hopefully you don't become in my position where you have almost no time to put together an interesting chart to publish, and all your time is kind of spent, dealing with the crowd. So before you get there, how did you get to your current position? Who are some of the people that influenced you? Because I'm sure, I don't know if you saw, CoinDesk's most influential list is like literally an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, that list was absolutely horrible. I didn't even know like half of the people on that list, to be honest. Like everyone other than like Elizabeth Stark, I don't know anyone else who was there. It was really just a joke of a list, definitely. I mean, in the last 3 years, I would say I've learned a lot from Pierre Rochard, a lot from Bitstein. Like that kind of crowd have just taught me so much, both like on the monetary econ side and on the Bitcoin side. My friend Adam Taché, Brandon Bernstein, Nick Carter, like all these guys essentially have taught me a lot, and I've been sort of really engaging with them a lot as of the last couple of years. So yeah, just, you're a regular OG Bitcoiners, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm pretty sure, like, I've read a lot of your stuff. I'm sure I can throw Saifedean into the mix and Willy Woo.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Willy Woo. So my partner and I have been like talking to Willy Woo for like hours on end, almost every day over the last couple of weeks. And I'm not going to reveal any of his secrets, but he is definitely has a ton of new indicators for you guys, like in store, a ton of new sort of frameworks and systems. He's really just quite a mind. And I've been utilizing some of the stuff that he's been working on. And I actually think that there's definitely an edge to be had by merging like TA and FA together, especially like on higher timeframes. Because we've never had an asset where you have like this transparent blockchain like on top of it or below it, I guess. And there's definitely a lot of signals that you can find by like plugging in your full node and like dissecting that information, like that micro information, so to speak.
Yeah, no, Willie is great. I mean, that's why I finally met him in person when we got together in Thailand, me, him, and Van Zen. I'm thinking of making that an annual meeting and slowly bringing in a few other analysts into that group. It'll be like, a week-long annual retreat with a few people that I trust in the space from the finance side. It'll be, I might open it to the public, to a very small group of, high-end money managers to attend something like that. So it's something I'm working. I'm going to start working on this after the Unconfiscatable conference. All right. Speaking of, let's start to dive right into it. And speaking of the Unconfiscatable conference, it's going to be one of my shortest plugs ever. So can I say it? There's a 90% chance you're going to be there, right?
Yes, sir.
I already said it. So it's not almost 100%. My graphic designer is already working on an image. I think you'll be the great replacement for Willy Woo, who unfortunately has not been able to make it. So Murad will most likely be joining us in Vegas for Unconfiscatable. You play poker, man? I can still get you a seat.
Yeah, I was actually the vice president of our poker organization at college. So yeah, I'll definitely would love to join.
Beautiful. So Murad is also going to be in for the poker game, and you're not a vegetarian, right? I mean, you are from Azerbaijan.
Definitely not.
Okay, perfect.
I'm doing like keto and like meat heavy.
Man, well, meat can kick you out of keto, right? Like I'm not in keto. Like I can't be in keto, but my diet choices have been very good lately. All right, cool. So that's the quick part. Oh, we lowered the price. We lowered the price back to 0.1. The people that paid slightly more than this in current tier are being refunded. So the price will be 0.1. We want to get more people there. So there you go. All right, let's jump into some of your work. We're finally at 1,000 viewers. So let's get going. Guys, if you want to follow Murad on Twitter, please check out Must Stop Murad. I put like 40 links of very useful things in the video description. So please check out the video description. And we're going to dive in with some of your very first work. We're going to jump right into it. I got a bunch of critical questions for you. And let's do it. So here's one of the first articles you published. You only published 2 articles on Medium, correct? Under your own name, and then one under, who published that one? I think David. By the way, do you want to, who is your partner in your hedge fund? Is that public or is that like a silent partner?
Yeah, David is one of my 2 partners. And he is likely going to be our head of research. Very, very smart guy. Has been sort of working with me, Willy Woo, Owen Wonder, and a couple of other very, very smart guys have been coming up with a lot of really cool indicators. He himself is has been a technical analysis master, I guess, for several years. And so just merging those 2 is definitely something we're focused on. But yeah, he's my partner. Just a brilliant guy.
And Adam is?
Adam, he is somebody who I co-authored a couple of articles with as well. A really good friend of mine, longtime Bitcoiner as well. Currently an engineer at Snapchat, I believe, but definitely somebody who I think is going to be, you will keep hearing his name in the Bitcoin space in the coming years, I don't doubt.
Got it. All right. So so you only published 2 articles on Medium. Did I Google that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the first one. And the second one was pretty much just more giving more light to the first one. So they're pretty much like one long article, both of them. And this actually was a pretty long article, but it was a very good read. So you broke down the 4 faces of Bitcoin. And you talked about Bitcoin as money. And let's briefly talk about the 4 of them one by one. I think it will be a good background on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin as money, and you described it, and then when you went into its counterpart, Bitcoin Cash, like using it as peer-to-peer. So you want to give us a brief summary, and I do have some specific questions about your 4 facets of Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the first one is the one that I think both you and I, and increasingly a bigger proportion of the observers in the space are subscribed to. And that's sort of the view that Safety Namus and Rochard, Bitstein have been promoting extensively. And of course, at the end, decades into the future, everybody wants Bitcoin to be a store of value and a medium of exchange at the same time, right? But there's been a lot of debate over the years which one of the 2 we should be prioritizing, technologically speaking. I believe firmly that we need to sort of first become digital gold and then later on become digital cash. And I think sort of the store of value function of money needs to be prioritized right now. And I think if you delve into the literature, Szabo and a lot of original Austrians, you will understand that, as well as Vijay Boyapati, you understand that money needs to first be a collectible, which I still think Bitcoin kind of is, slowly moving to store of value, which is number 2. Then you're going to move to medium of exchange, and then you're going to move to unit of account. And I think people who are prioritizing digital cash or a medium of exchange right at this very second are completely off base, because I think people prefer their medium of exchange or day-to-day cash to be relatively stable, which Bitcoin isn't yet. Hopefully it's going to be, let's say 8-9 years later. There also right now exist strong disincentives to spend. Why would you ever spend something which can still go 200x, right? I like to joke that spending Bitcoin today is like spending Google stock in 2001 at a Starbucks shop. It does really make sense. I know you believe in spending Bitcoin if the other accepting party is a Bitcoin hodler as well. But in general, in aggregate terms, I think I personally am not going to be spending Bitcoin for at least 8-9 more years. And I think that's kind of rational.
You will if your income is in Bitcoin, right?
Yes. So if you the exception to this rule is if you either get your income in Bitcoin, or you were one of those people who have sold everything, have no fiat, have 100% of your liquid net worth, at least in Bitcoin. And of course, in that situation, you're going to be spending Bitcoin like on your necessities. However, I think like an average person and even an average like cryptocurrency participant, I think what's likely going to happen like in the decades to come is that people are going to have a mix of Bitcoin and fiat. Let's say today that number is like 90% fiat and 10% crypto, if you are like a market participant, right? And I think like as years go by and Bitcoin becomes more legitimate, that proportion is like the proportion of cash allocation that goes into Bitcoin is going to slowly increase. And I think like over the long term, we're going to see like Thier's law, where people start hoarding Bitcoins and spending fiat. And I think like the velocity of Bitcoin is going to decrease and its value is going to increase, while at the same time, velocity of fiat is going to increase and its value is going to decrease. So roughly speaking, what Venezuelan bolivars are to US dollar, the US dollar is to Bitcoin. And that's sort of my vision in like for the long-term future, I guess.
Right. And to me, like the altcoins sit in between that, right? Like I think I have like $10 or $20 worth of Litecoin in my phone and I can't wait to spend it somewhere, right? But like, that's not how I feel about the Bitcoin in my phone.
Definitely. I mean, there is no argument in my mind that Bitcoin at the moment is by far the cryptocurrency that's most likely and best positioned to sort of approach that store value phase.
All right. So so then you go into talking.
So I guess
you went very detailed. By the way, like I have to say that like you use the word Bitcoin maximalist way too often in in that article, and and the thing is, not all I guess Bitcoin maximalists are created equal. And but this was written almost a year ago now. Isn't it crazy how time flies? You wrote this back in April, and we're already in 2019.
Yeah, I think like 2018 just flew by so quickly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of the interesting things in that first section about when you talked about the perception of Bitcoin maximalists, you do say that a lot of us think that Satoshi, was this visionary and he created like the perfect economic model. And I don't actually agree with that. I don't think he created a perfect economic model. I think he was almost guessing like everybody else. I mean, he did have this vision of having, a large stock to flow, like large stock to small flow ratio, and making it more like gold. But as far as, creating the X number of coins into existence, that was more like a random guess, that it was like, hey, we're going to start off with 50 coins and we're going to have it every 4 years, which Peter Todd believes it was a terrible idea. And you also pointed out in one of your tweets, we come to the startling truth that it doesn't matter what the supply of money is. Any supply will do, as well as any other supply. The free market will simply adjust, changing to the purchasing power. And I actually agree with that. Like, it doesn't really matter how many Bitcoin Satoshi created. And I don't like the economic shock of having every 4 years. It would have been nicer for a much smoother transition without this huge economic shock. Saifedean doesn't see a big difference. He says that, everyone will just adjust, but I don't like that economic shock every 4 years. So what are your thoughts on that? It's been like, 8 months since you wrote that. I'm sure your thoughts on the economic theory have advanced. So anything you want to add to the economic side of what Satoshi chose?
Yeah, so I think like the fixed supply is the best monetary policy. It's difficult for an altcoin or any kind of other money to differentiate themselves in terms of monetary policy, because just like this quote says, it doesn't matter what the number is. It doesn't matter if it's 21 million or 25 million. What matters is that like society accepts and people believe, and also like technologically speaking, it's sustainable that we have a fixed supply. A lot of people, and especially engineers, they think that like these unstoppable transactions or uncensorable payments are like the killer app here. And to me, like that's cool. But like what's really going to get billions of dollars invested into Bitcoin, I think, is its fixed supply. And like the difficulty adjustment, in my mind, is one of the most brilliant parts of Bitcoin's design that Satoshi essentially came up with. It's Bitcoin's disinflationary nature that, in my mind, is the most revolutionary. Centralized currencies always get inflated without exception. And even in ancient Rome, gold was sort of susceptible to inflationary pressures, counterfeiting by the government, lesser gold amounts and coins, etc. And Bitcoin is just like a 10x improvement over both gold and fiat in my mind. And in my even though like the three value propositions of Bitcoin are uncensorability, unseizability, and unprintability. And in my mind, like I agree with Safety that unprintability is by far like the biggest revolution.
Yeah, I'm the other way on that one, right? So those are three properties. My presentation at Unconfiscatable is gonna talk about all three of those properties. So what's your order of the three properties? Because I think we're gonna be in backwards order on these.
Well, so there's one thing what, for example, like a user might enjoy. It also depends on who you are. If you are a wealthy person in the first world, you don't get censored anyway. And like you don't get your bank accounts frozen anyway. However, I believe asset managers will eventually allocate a Bitcoin just because of how scarce it is. So it depends on who you are, what kind of a stakeholder you are. If you are, let's say, like a marginalized minority, or like, let's say, like a porn star or some kind of a political dissident, whatever, if you get censored, then to you, uncensorability matters the most. If you are someone in Venezuela, I guess unseizability matters the most. If you are a large investment manager or a pension fund or the hedge fund or a savvy hedge fund, the unprintability matters more. But it's like if unprintability wasn't there, Bitcoin would never grow to like trillions of dollars, which I believe it will. So like that's the one which is going to get money in. But once again, like it depends on who you are. But to me, I think like the supply is the coolest, followed by unseizability, like you being able to carry $1 billion through an airport in your brain. Like I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I'm slightly the other way there. I mean, like all three properties are important. Oh man, here we go. All three properties are important. I actually go slightly the other way philosophically on this. And I'm probably gonna, because I've been using in my presentation, I've been using the word monetary policy. I think I'm gonna change that to unprintability because it's a good word. It mimics the word unconfiscatability. For me, unconfiscatability is the biggest property because to me, I think unconfiscatability matters the most for the rich, not the poor. Because historically, when regimes change and politics change, they go after the rich first and they try to seize the money from the rich. Whether it was 1,000 years ago and they go after like the church because they have too much money and too many donations and too many gold statues and the king is broke, or whether it's, 100 years ago with the wars, let's demonize the rich, like what happened in Russia with, the communists coming in, or what happened in Germany. So to me, I think that the rich are in the most danger. Same thing what happened in Cyprus, right? Hey, we have too many rich Russians holding money at our banks. Let's confiscate it. So I look at it the other way around, that the unconfiscatability matters to the rich way more. And as far as the big hedge funds are concerned, I think unprintability doesn't matter to them because they're in a position of having the insider information where they take advantage of the printability of money to their maximum advantage to profit the most. So I'm slightly the other way on this one. I mean, they're all important. It's just that I rank them a little bit differently. And I do think that Bitcoin would be maybe not as powerful today, but pretty damn powerful if Satoshi, if he would have said, 2% inflation forever, probably would not have been very good. But if, let's say, we had 100 coins per block, I'm just picking 100 because it makes a more sense number than 50. If, let's say, he did 100 coins per block per 10 minutes indefinitely. So even in like 30 years, you're getting 100 Bitcoin per block, but the stock to flow ratio is still going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, so two things I will say here. First of all, if Satoshi started with 2% permanent inflation, then like an altcoin or a Bitcoin fork would change that to be fixed supply, and that fixed supply one would win. Paul Storch has a pretty good article on this, like talking about Bitcoin deflation. But essentially, in the free market, without government intervention, I believe people would game theoretically converge to a coin or a currency which is as fixed supply as possible. So like either strictly fixed supply or like as low inflation as possible, as long as it's secure and sustainable, right?
Oh, I can debate that.
Why?
Look at Zcash, right? I mean, Zcash created a coin that's currently still stealing 20% of all the coins to a small group of people, and
that's more of like that's development tax rather than
right,
monetary.
exactly, right? I'm getting to that, right? And what's his name? Rhett, who I think is an idiot, cloned it to eliminate that, and that was a useless fork, right? Obviously, the Zcash clone is advantageous, but no one's going to use it because no one trusts the development of it, right? So it wouldn't be about strictly money supply, because at the end of the day, what makes it the stable money supply is the developers of the code and the fact that you trust that the code won't change. So just because someone creates, turns a Bitcoin with infinite inflation into a Bitcoin with finite money supply, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to win. It's still going to go down who's developing it and what are the chances it'll stay a finite money supply. Now, I will agree with you that it's a lot easier to migrate from a Bitcoin with infinite 2% inflation to one with a finite supply, but I don't think it would have worked for a Bitcoin with, let's say, 100 Bitcoin per block forever to eventually we have no Bitcoin, because that is currently still the debate. How will miners be paid in 20 years?
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually have a list of like 20 criteria that matter the most for a store of value, and quality of engineers that are working on the protocol are like number 2 or number 3 on that list. So I definitely agree with you. And I think the reason why Zcash forks, which forked out the developer tax, just didn't go anywhere and collapsed and are now down negative 99% is because like people at the end of the day do care. Like these are not strictly physical objects. These are not metals from Earth. These are at the end of the day software which are being developed by humans. Even though I'm not bullish on Zcash at the moment, and I don't really like their whole like foundation and their development tax, their like team is like actually pretty intelligent and have some of the best cryptographers. So which is why like people still ascribe some premium to that coin. But yeah,
let's see what happens when a developer tax dies.
Well, I mean, I will make a controversial prediction that they will try to extend the tax.
Oh, I'm not surprised, right? And that proves how their code is not, what's the word I'm looking for here? Unchangeable.
It's not immutable.
Immutable. Thank you. I can't believe that one slipped out of my line. All right, let's move on. We have a lot more.
Here's the thing, like Zuko tweets too much, which is bearish for the currency. Like people like money is all about trust and reliability, predictability. The best store of value is going to be the one which people are going to be comfortable placing their money in and going to sleep. So the one that makes you sleep better is going to win. And the problem with Zuko, he's talking about, oh, maybe we should add inflation. Maybe we shouldn't add inflation. Maybe we should move to proof of stake or hybrid proof of work, proof of stake. And maybe we should change the mining algorithm. All these things are like give miners, investors, everybody a lot of anxiety. And so this is like really bad for price. I can't believe they don't understand this.
Yeah, well, it's the Vitalik. I think he learned that from Vitalik, right? No, and I think this stems from this thing. It's like, hey, I just heard about Bitcoin last month. I'm going to create a better one without ever thinking about the problem that Bitcoin solved. And And this is my problem with all of these altcoins, because it's like some guy that learns about Bitcoin, and within 4 months, he starts a new project, never having thought about the problem. And again, in my presentation, which no one has ever seen other than a few test runs at meetups, I talk about how like Peter Todd's been trying to create Bitcoin since he was like 14 years old, right? It's been like all of these like emails with people with like Hal Finney and a lot of these core developers and Satoshi. I mean, they've been talking about this for like 10, 15 years, and this was the solution. Like everything that these guys are doing, Vitalik, Zuko, all these other people, all of this had been thought of, all of this had been debated 15, 20 years ago, and it was all found to be useless.
Yeah, I'm not very bullish on privacy coins. I think they might pump in the next, like in the 2019 to the 2023 cycle, just because a lot of the like money that's not here right now, but that will be here, they'll like try to diversify into privacy coins, because like that will be perceived as a differentiation. But I think that like privacy alone isn't enough to compete against Bitcoin. And also Bitcoin privacy is improving. Store of value is more about like liquidity. And even if you are trying to be different, like you need to have a lot more differentiation than just privacy. So I don't know. It's going to be a very uphill battle for Zcash, Monero, and even Grin to be competing against Bitcoin as a store of value, because you need to be a store of value in order to win. And it's just like going to be very tough for them to compete against Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I agree with you as well. We can talk about that, but we're also going to talk about price in the near future. Let's just finish this up. So that's your view on the Bitcoin that you and I believe, like Saifedean, Pierre, Jimmy Song, like people in all the people in my circles, at least I'm sure mostly yours as well. You may have to be a little more politically correct than me because of your business model versus my business model. So let's talk about Bcash, and I don't know. Do you call it Bcash or do you call it Bitcoin Cash? How much respect do you give that movement?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to be politically correct at all. All of my LPs are essentially like Soviets that I brought to the space first. Like I don't depend on anyone, so I don't care. I think Bcash is destined to fail. It's going to go to literally zero.
Stop. Let's destined to fail. You don't think it failed with what happened last month with the Craig Wright?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's already a failure. I mean, like it's going to go to like 1% of Bitcoin's market cap. Like it's still overvalued, both of them.
Right, and again, you described the concept of they wanted to be medium of exchange first, and store of value will magically come later because it's a hot potato that nobody actually wants. I just don't get it.
Well, exactly. Like, I think the reason why Bitcoin Cash exists is because its leadership doesn't understand monetary economics. Store of value must precede medium of exchange. And if you look at the history, like if you look at ancient history of like shells, silver, gold, like a jewelry that's been used as money, and all these like commodity monies, you will see that it was a store of value for decades and centuries before it even started being used as liquid cash. And like even if you look at Bitcoin Cash today, nobody's using it. Like increasing that block size to 32 megabytes was pointless because no one is using it. It doesn't matter. People want to use something. Like even today, Bitcoin, like even though I say that like people are not going to spend it for years or whatever, people are still using it much more than they're using any other altcoin. And so, and it's also moving like $1 billion to $2 billion per day, settling that much. And so like Bitcoin Cash to me is just a joke. It is just an altcoin essentially. Like my friend Matt Odell calls it like a fork coin, but really it's just, and like the way they've been trying to appropriate the brand as well, very scammy. I think it had more to do with like egos than any like serious technological advancements, but that's generally my view on the issue.
Right, and my problem is like when I debate Roger Ver and like I watch him debate others, I mean, like his whole debate is that he understands monetary theory better than the guy he's debating, and Bitcoin needs to be medium of exchange first before store of value. Like well, like how do you debate something that is like so flawed in concept that it's like the complete opposite of what it is? Like, I guess this is this is one of the problems, and I guess this is how societies never change. Like, it's all the same. It's like Bitcoin.com is the propaganda side of Bitcoin. Like, well, like I guess the media side of things and the way people try to convince people by telling them the opposite of what it is. It's like 1984, like constantly with every new thing that comes out in the world.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for anybody that was extensively involved in Bitcoin Cash, to be honest. Like, instead of just like maintaining their reputation and wealth and just quietly supporting Bitcoin as it was growing, now they've essentially just ruined their reputation, lost a lot of money, and have been essentially known for supporting like two failed shitcoins. So that's that.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we completely agree on that. Now let's talk about something that's actually a little bit different, right? So you also talked about John Nash's ideal money. You want to give us a brief overview of that? And this we could, like I always like to introduce new things to my audience. I mean, them learning about what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin Cash is not new to them. So let's get to some new stuff. John Nash's ideal money, go.
Indeed. So there's a person on Twitter, Soker Patoshi, also known as Juice on Medium. He has been a proponent of this idea that Bitcoin is not going to be used as much like itself, as instead is going to be appropriated by central banks, and it's going to be almost exactly like gold, in the sense that fiat currencies and government currencies that exist right now, like 200 of them, they're not going to die. Instead, they're going to go back like they were before 1971, and they're going to be redeemable for Bitcoin. Now, what this is going to do is just like in 19th century Europe, even though like the French and the German and like the Danish currencies like had different pieces of paper, they were essentially simply different weights in gold, right? And so he thinks that there's going to be a similar effect here. It's kind of relevant to some of ideas that Hal Finney proposed on Bitcoin Talk back in the day. But generally, I believe like these people don't believe that Lightning Network will be as extensively used as I or some other people believe it will be used. And they don't think that fiat currencies will die. They don't think that governments will allow them to. They think that governments have like a lot of avenues to prevent loss of monetary policy completely. So in this ideal money scenario, governments would have like they would have much less power in terms of monetary policy than they do today, but they would still have some left, as opposed to like the extreme like Bitcoin ultra maximalist idea where money and state are separated entirely. And my view on this is that I don't necessarily agree. I actually think that something like this is possible, but even if it will be, only temporarily, if at all. And I think over the long run, there's no point in trusting a representative money redeemable in Bitcoin as opposed to using Bitcoin itself. Now, we can get into more complicated debates whether, like you previously mentioned, if on-chain transactions are going to be super expensive, then something like this is more likely. But I guess it remains to be seen. A lot of my friends are more optimistic. They believe that Bitcoin's block size will be increased, but very conservatively and very pragmatically and slowly, as well as with some other optimizations like Mast and Schnorr and a bunch of others. The throughput will be increased, and we will manage to, even though on-chain fees will be higher than they are today, they'll be in the range of like $50 to $100, which is like not so bad. So that something like this is not going to emerge. Like, we don't want a world where only like 100 central banks and big commercial banks are using the base chain. We want people to be using the base chain. So like that's the idea.
Yeah, so we're going to get back to this for a second. Have you seen the Eric Voskel's presentation from the Bitcoin Honey Badger, where he specifically talked about that post by Hal Finney?
Yeah, I mean, I was there in the second row. So.
Oh, wait, you were there?
I was, yeah.
Did we speak? Did you come up to me?
So I tried to come up to you, but like during day one, but like you were surrounded by like 20 people. So like, and then like the next lecture began. So I kind of procrastinated there a little bit. But yeah, that that Eric Vosko's lecture there is very relevant. Like, he is the person who always talks about how, like, if the chain isn't going to be used, we're not going to succeed. Like, use the chain, use the full, verify the transactions. You got to use the chain, otherwise it's not going to work.
Right. I'm actually going to play like 2 minutes of it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even if you would have come up to me, like, I wasn't aware of your work back then, I'm aware of it now. But yeah, but I'll see you at the next one. I don't know when the next one is, but I'll certainly be there. You might be speaking at the next one. We'll see.
That would be.
Right, let me play this real quick.
So I'm going to be flipping back and forth with next slides. So bear with me. That's me. That's you guys. I was here last year. I forget what I talked about, but all right. So there's a lot of content to explain this concept, reserve currency fallacy. It's very hard to kind of get through it in the amount of time we have, so I'm going to go quickly. I'll be available for questions at party time or anytime. Be here next couple of days. So just to put things in perspective, we're going to go through these 4 slides to talk about kind of the history of this question of scaling. Sorry. Okay. So the first public discussion of Bitcoin was this post and the following post on the right. Probably are familiar with this if you've been around at all. So Satoshi said, I've been working on a new electronic cash system that's fully peer-to-peer with no trusted third party. And the first response was James A. Donald. And 2 days later, we very, very much need such a system, but the way I understand your proposal, it does not seem to scale to the required size. First problem identified very clearly. So Satoshi's response was, oh, Jesus, I need to time this so I'm over here. Satoshi's response was the first scaling proposal. Big blocks, okay? So we've been dealing with that for a while. We kind of know where that has ended up. Satoshi was wrong, okay? And we'll talk later about how and why, but this isn't gonna work. Okay, so, come on guys. Second scaling proposal. This is Hal Finney. Sorry about the small text. It was I thought it was useful to get out there. Maybe too small for everybody to read, and this is kind of one of the most important slides, so I'm just going to read through it. There's a very good reason for Bitcoin-backed banks to exist, issuing their own digital cash currency redeemable for Bitcoins. Bitcoin itself cannot scale to have every single financial transaction in the world be broadcasting to everyone and included in the blockchain. There needs to be a secondary level of payment systems, which is lighter weight and more efficient. Likewise, the time needed for Bitcoin transactions to finalize will be impractical for medium to large value purchases. Bitcoin-backed banks will solve these problems. They can work like banks did before nationalization of currency. Different banks can have different policies, some more aggressive, some more conservative, some will be fractional reserve, while others may be 100% Bitcoin-backed. Interest rates may vary. Cash from some banks may trade at a discount to that from others. George Selgin has worked out the theory of competitive free banking in detail and argues that such a system would be stable, inflation-resistant, and self-regulating. I believe this will be the ultimate fate of Bitcoin, to be the high-powered money that serves as a reserve currency for banks that issue their own digital cash. Most Bitcoin transactions will occur between banks to settle net transfers. Bitcoin transactions by private individuals will be as rare as Bitcoin-based purchases are today. Hal Finney, 2010. That may be the second scaling proposal. I'm not a historian, so if anybody is aware of an earlier one, let me know. I just throw that up there because it's an interesting example of how the first 2 kind of major Bitcoin contributors were very wrong about scaling. Now, this, despite being an ancient scaling proposal that we seem to have moved past, seems to be an idea that we just can't kill. So I'm here to try to help people kill it. Some of those terms in there should concern people that have been around for a while. Yep. Should I just point at you and you? All right, that's much better. Okay, so modern scaling proposals. It's not exhaustive. I don't know. I don't work on these things. I work on Bitcoin exclusively because that's the Bitcoin. That's where we are right now. So I try not to comment too much on them. But these are more modern scaling proposals: side chains, drive chains, Lightning Network. Everybody familiar with these?
All right, I guess that's enough. And right, so those were the 2 scaling proposals, right? Satoshi proposing big blocks, and Hal Finney proposing that, hey, no one's actually going to be using Bitcoin other than giant institutions, and it's going to be more of a settlement layer. And I know Saifedean talked a little bit about that in his book as well. I think there's going to be a happy medium there somewhere. I think the world economics is going to find a happy medium. And we do have Lightning, and there are going to be other projects. And I think this world that Hal Finney described of Bitcoin transactions being too expensive for the average person, I mean, I think that can still happen, but not in my lifetime. That's for damn sure, because I think there is enough scaling there. I mean, we are talking every single transaction around the world being exclusively Bitcoin before we, have to deal with that scenario, in my opinion, of it being so expensive for an average person. I think there's plenty of room for Lightning for people to use it and stuff like that. And I do think there's going to be the fiat currencies and government currencies aren't going away. Cash is going away. People seem to confuse government currencies going away with cash going away. I try to explain that to people that most currencies around the world are already 98% cryptocurrencies. They're just not censorship resistant and they're not, unprintable. I mean, that's the difference.
Yeah, definitely. Indeed, I think like 92% of money is already digital. It's the cryptography and the private keys and the unprintability that is sort of the differentiation here. We'll definitely see sort of a war, a battle between sort of centralized and decentralized monetary frameworks going forward. I would not be as optimistic about the freedom of the world if like something like Bitcoin didn't exist at the moment. I would be pretty concerned. People make an argument, and that's kind of related to the fourth theory, but not really. The world and the human civilization is like a healthy body, right? And there is some kind of a virus, a cancer of oppression. And so Bitcoin is intelligent engineers fighting back against sort of this constant theft, both on the taxation side as well as on the inflation tax side. And so essentially, Bitcoin is retaliation against that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Right. So, so you do agree, like you don't expect government currencies to die in our lifetime. I mean, I don't.
I do, for sure.
You do. I really don't. I do see Bitcoin as being more of a check on government and them printing money more responsibly. I mean, a lot of the countries won't, because the people will always have an option of using Bitcoin peer-to-peer through Lightning and through maybe some other amazing projects built on top of Bitcoin. I don't see it going away.
Here's the thing, right? Like, if governments stop printing, their entire financial system collapses. And I think that you may underestimate how fast technology will keep growing into the future. I think the internet, like we live in the age of acceleration. And so I think before my death, I expect cryptocurrencies to be the dominant form of money.
Oh no, I got 20 years on you, so I better be in one hell of a shape so that evens out. But no, I don't see them stopping the printing press. I just see them printing more responsibly, right? Like, for example, the US actually prints more responsibly than everybody else. And if the US starts printing a little more responsibly, and then what does that mean for the other countries, right? Like a lot of the other countries will collapse. I mean, these things come and go. I mean, when I was in Colombia, people in Colombia are actually very open to people from Venezuela coming to their country and restarting their lives, because a lot of Colombians remember when Venezuela was, the booming economy of Latin America, and Colombians were in trouble, and they would all go to Venezuela, to get away from their ridiculous economic situation. And now Colombia is doing, I'm not going to say great, but they're doing okay. I mean, I was there through 3 cities, and very nice place. I really enjoyed it. I think their economy is doing pretty well. So, I mean, these things come and go. Perhaps when in 15 years, Venezuela is going to be printing way more responsibly than all the other countries in Latin America. I mean, you never know.
But so here's the thing, right? Even if they say print for 10, 15 years responsibly, there's always a possibility of them going back to their irresponsible ways.
Well, I would say
more and more people
inevitability.
Yeah, I think more and more, and just I think like especially people my age, the younger demographic, we don't trust humans anymore. We trust like mathematics, cryptography, algorithms much more. And also, I think part of the reason why America is so strong is because they have the privilege of the control of the world's reserve currency. They have the seigniorage rights of the biggest currency. And I think other nations may or may not be interested in this, at least with a apolitical, neutral stance.
Yeah, no, and I mean, yeah, we can debate monetary. I don't want to move on from monetary theory. We have one last monetary concept, which is borderline monetary concept. I actually not familiar with this. I read it through your articles. I mean, I've heard people talk about it, but it's mostly the Ethereum crazies. But I guess there's enough Bitcoin crazies that want to put Bitcoin on top of Ethereum. This is just insanity. This Bitcoin as the information energy black hole layer. You want to give us? I mean, I saw some of the tweets you highlighted from Mark Wilcox, who I've never heard of. This is insane. George Gilder I've actually met, and DeSantis I've met several times. But this seems insane to me. You want to give us a quick overview of this concept of Bitcoin as information and energy black hole layer?
Yeah. So I'm not particularly certain of this one because it's very, very kind of mysterious and esoteric. But essentially, the people believe that like Bitcoin as a whole can be a lot more than money and a lot more than digital gold. And so essentially, they think that as the system grows, it can provide a lot more.
Damn. I think we're losing him. It's not my connection is pretty good. Unfortunately, Murad's connection might be a little rough on the other side of the world. He'll come back. I do want to highlight this tweet by Emin Gunsayer, the professor at Cornell, who I wonder when he said it. A little over a year ago, when he said, "I wonder how long it'll be before we can implement Bitcoin on top of Ethereum and get a more decentralized system than the real Bitcoin." This is why this camp is absolutely nuts. Oh, Murad, you're back.
Yeah, so I think actually Emin Gunsayer is unfortunately one of those people who might be talented at engineering and distributed systems, but once again completely misunderstands monetary economics and how it relates to the valuation of cryptocurrencies. Essentially, he is building his own altcoin, I believe, trying to have like higher throughput or something like that, without realizing that really throughput, especially on the base layer, is probably like the 5th or the 6th most important thing. Like, as we discussed, credibility of monetary policy, security, and like the Lindy effect, liquidity, all these things matter a lot more than like just like fast transactions. And like these people, I don't know if they like don't understand it or they're pretending to be ignorant, but this might ruffle some feathers, but there's people who have what we call Satoshi envy. And there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those people starting their own altcoins in that sense, trying to sort of get fame and power and money from their own projects. But once again, I think it's going to be a really uphill battle. But back to the topic, This essentially, for theory, they think that Bitcoin can one day replace like AWS or something like that. The way I understand it, the last time I engaged with these people, it required much, much bigger blocks than what Bitcoin is currently pursuing. So this is kind of not really relevant to us at the moment. But yeah, they believe that Bitcoin can be more than money. It can provide computation, like bandwidth, memory, whatever, a bunch of like different services, like and be this like global supercomputer.
All right, you know what? Let's move on. I got one last topic before we actually move on to Bitcoin's analytics, the MVRV ratios, and what you think about Bitcoin's price. And that last topic is your general view of altcoins. I did listen to your interview with Pump, and you did mention that you have traded or potentially will trade some of the altcoins to earn more Bitcoin. And I never, ever, ever have a problem with that. But what's your general thoughts on altcoins? And do you think any altcoins have potential for anything useful? Because as you know, my view, I don't believe that they do. And we are collecting questions from the audience, and a lot of the audience would like your latest thoughts on Decred, because I think you've potentially spoken somewhat highly of them in the past. So let's do a quick coin discussion. And for that, the only graphic that I have is the one you put up about silver. And Saifedean like blew my world when he explained why silver was no longer money as of the 20th century. And once Bitcoin became the settlement layer for paper money, silver lost all of its use as money. And a lot of the gold bugs and silver bugs just haven't figured that out yet. But it rang a bell in my head immediately. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all my silver? It's literally worthless.
Yeah, so I think that I align more with Willy Woo on this topic, actually. If you remember what he described when you guys were in Thailand. So I actually think that at least for the foreseeable future, let's say foreseeable 20, 30 years, Bitcoin, their altcoins are going to survive. And although a much fewer number than people think. So I'm not a multi-coiner by any means, but I think that we're probably going to have like 2 or 3 cryptocurrencies. Now, I think Bitcoin is probably going to take 70 to 80% of the market, but I don't think it's going to take all of it. And I think there is some space for obviously a smaller number 2 or number 3. And so like, and the reason I say this is because these aren't, once again, these aren't tangible physical like stones or metals. There is actually like, they're much softer because they're software. You can have bugs. I don't think having exclusively one sort of security model and one chain is like decentralized. I think having like 3 or 4 different currencies and different blockchains that all utilize sort of different security models, different elliptic curves, different programming languages, different like people, different communities, etc. I think at least for the foreseeable future is just better. And on a more cynical perspective, as I've already described, I think like the people who are going to come here who aren't yet in this market, they will not be investing in one currency only. That's just human nature, and old habits die fast. I think like the Wall Street people who are going to come and other people, they're probably going to be investing in like 3 or 4 store of value candidates rather than just one at the moment. I view CoinMarketCap as a giant, persistent, live prediction market where market caps represent probabilities of that coin like winning or like becoming one of the few winners, right? And so even if the Bitcoin ultra maximalist single currency dream might come true one day, I think that time is just so far away. And I don't consider altcoins to be illegitimate. I think fighting against Bitcoin is going to be extremely hard. But I mean, I'm all for capitalism and free markets and competition, as long as, of course, there's no like scammery involved.
All right. So what do you see? I mean, even if you're right, like I have no ability to pick winners and losers. I mean, I can show you pictures where Aurora coin had the second highest market cap and Paycoin had the third highest market cap. And Ripple at one point had a higher market cap than Bitcoin when it hit like $4. And man, if I can get, I'm sure all of these people have deleted their accounts, but like, I don't know if you remember the Paycoin days of 2014 when everyone was saying how Paycoin was going to dethrone Bitcoin. And it was as stupid then as it is now. Let's get your comments on Decred, because I'm not familiar with your views on Decred before. Jimmy and I, are on. Jimmy Song was also spoken positively about Decred. Charlie Lee has spoken positively about Decred. I think Charlie Lee is the reason why we know about Decred, because I think he started that whole bandwagon. It's amazing how a prominent person mentions what I think is a shitcoin, and then like so many people get on the bandwagon. And I don't see anything good there. I don't respect the coin, but Jimmy tried to explain to me otherwise. Maybe you can as well.
Yeah. So just to be clear, at the moment, I'm only bullish on Bitcoin and Decred. But I think it's very, very interesting. It's very, very secure. It has like a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake model, which, assuming equal market caps, which is like obviously not the case right now, but assuming equal market caps, it's like more expensive to 51% attack, because you need like 51% of like both the stake and the hardware. I think it's really worth experimenting with different governance models. I think it's worth experimenting with like different, like essentially systems, different security models. Unlike privacy coins, what I like about Decred is that it's not differentiating just on one criteria, but it's differentiating along like 6 or 7 criteria at the same time. I also think that, frankly, miners receiving 100% of the reward may or may not be the best solution. I think, like, for example, like Luke Dash Jr. can't find like money to work on Bitcoin. Like, that's just somebody as talented as that should never be the case. And like, I think dedicating 10% of the block reward to a treasury, which is like, is going to pay engineers and pay other like people who are going to promote the chain, is like very cool. And unlike Zcash, where like 3 people at the foundation control this, Decred is trying to, well, still in the process of, but trying to move to a system where the coin holders vote how to spend every single dollar, which I think is very, very cool. And yeah, like Decred is the opposite of a scam. Like, these people have been working tirelessly for like just on the product and not really promoting it at all, unlike like Tron, IOTA, Ripple, etc. And I think if investors coming to the space are going to diversify into 3 or 4 store value candidates, this might be one of them. But once again, this is special.
How is that different than Dash?
Yeah, Dash is a shitcoin compared to Decred. It's much more centralized. It's like the whole masternode system is extremely oligarchic. And like it had a much like bigger pre-mine historically. And it's just not as secure as like hybrid proof of work, proof of stake model is. And frankly, I think the people working on Decred are much more talented than the Dash team. Once again, it's all about people, right? Because this is software. The Decred people have been working on BTC Suite for 3 years before they've even started Decred. And they are some of OG Bitcoiners that were there since 2012, 2013. And I think what they're building is definitely credible. I think proof of work plus hard to change model, which is what Bitcoin is doing, is very good, probably the best for digital gold. But I think it's like on-chain governance, I think, is really promising. And like if that system works well, which is yet to be seen, it's going to be much more efficient. Another interesting thing about Decred is it's fork resistant. So something like Bitcoin Cash can never happen on Decred. the way it's set up is that it's resistant to chain splits and contentious forks. If something like Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Gold ever happens there, it would be extremely extensive to maintain because coin holders need to approve like every change to the protocol. So I think that's going to be very palatable to both retail and institutional investors. I think flexibility is very important. Remember when in the beginning of this interview, you said that, who knows, maybe we will need to change monetary policy in Bitcoin in the future because fees alone might not be enough. Or there's going to be a big privacy war, fungibility debate on the first layer. Or, you know, like we know that there's 5 or 6, let's say, unanswered questions in Bitcoin. And look, they might all be answered, but I view Decred as an adaptability hedge and uncertainty hedge because Decred doesn't want to ossify at the moment, and it's very adaptable like a lizard. And I think there's something attractive about that flexibility. So I don't consider Litecoin to be the silver to Bitcoin's gold because Litecoin is totally useless. It has no differentiation. I consider Decred to be the silver to Bitcoin's gold because it's essentially a completely different system.
Well, you and I definitely disagree there. And I mean, I don't consider anything to be silver to Bitcoin's gold because there is no more use for silver, right? That's the that's the monetary side argument. And yeah, so I'm still anti-Decred. I think my followers know my views on Decred. They're not that different than my views on Dash or on Litecoin, though I do agree Dash is way more scammier because of their masternode program and their Instamine. But in general, yeah, so you and I go the other way there. We'll probably revisit this conversation in a couple of years. We'll see how a lot of these altcoins do. So you don't agree with me that for the bear market ends when Bitcoin is able to completely separate from the altcoins. You still think that altcoins will pump along with Bitcoin at the next bull run. And we're going to talk about soon when we both see the next bull run.
Yes, I think it's too optimistic on your part to expect all altcoins to die. I think many will, but I think half a dozen to a dozen will survive. And the ones that do, look, like you might not like me saying this on your channel, but premium altcoins are going to outperform Bitcoin in the next cycle. That's just a matter of life. Like that's just a fact. And they're much smaller. They're much less liquid. And when money comes in, you just need cents on the dollar to move them rapidly, right? And so there's an opportunity. Like this might sound cynical of me, but there's an opportunity there. You might get 25x, 30x with Bitcoin in the next bubble, bottom to top, but you might get a lot more with alts. So that's just that.
Yeah, no, it's not that it's not about not liking you saying that on my channel. It's just that I disagree with it, right? I don't see that. If one or two does, I know I have no ability to know which one or two it'll be. So, it's probably not going to be the one or two you're expecting. So I am expecting Ethereum to keep going down as Bitcoin rises, Litecoin to keep going down, and maybe something else that may or may not even currently exist. That may somehow pump because it's new, but then that would go away on the next cycle. But as far as like the top 20 to 30 that you know of today, I don't expect them to pump faster than Bitcoin on the next bull run. And that's how I would actually know that the bull run has finally begun. That's just my view on it, but we can move on. Let's get into the weeds of Bitcoin analytics. I know we're about an hour in. Hopefully we have one more hour to go. Let's talk about the MVRV. So you spend a little bit of time working with Nick Carter, and tell us about, I mean, again, another great presentation from the conference. Let me see if it's in the video description. The Nick Carter's presentation was great. Where is it? I don't remember if it was on day 1 or day 2. There it is. No, that's 101 investing with Nick Carter. Whereas it was probably on day 2. If I go to HODL, And I'm not going to play it, but so you guys know where to find it. If you go to, I think that's day 2. I'm going to pause that, and then we go to video description. Damn it, that's not the day 2. My bad. Anyway, you can find the video, guys. It's the day 2. It's the 8 hour. So that's what I clicked on. It's one of these 2 videos, Nick Carter's presentation. All right, let's talk about the MVRV ratio, the market value to realized value. I don't know how many people watched the presentation, but it's great. Tell us about it, a quick overview, and why it's so much more useful than regular market cap.
Yeah, so realized cap is very interesting. It's an idea that was first proposed by Rochard, and then Nick Carter and his partner Antoine Localves sort of dive deeper, and then sort of me and my partner David Puel have dived even deeper further a little bit. But essentially, realized value, instead of counting all the coins at equal current price, what it does is it takes every coin, every UTXO essentially, and multiplies it by the price on the day when the coin last moved. And essentially what that does is several things. It reduces the impact of long lost coins. And it also essentially shows you what the average, let's say the average aggregate cost basis of people is as of late, or like after the last bubble, so to speak, right? And historically, when you graph market cap and realized cap together on the same graph,
that's the graph we're looking at right now.
Yes, exactly. So as you can see, every time the market value went below realized value, you can think of realized value as quote unquote like fair value, right? Or that's what's the fair value in people, the median fair value in people's minds, so to speak. And if you notice, if historically you bought Bitcoin every time market value went below realized value, you would ended up profiting very handsomely. And this is actually an old graph. This graph is from September or October, I believe, from September. Right now, we're already below it, actually. And this graph is essentially the same thing. It's just plotted one divided by the other. So if we are below...
I just went over to Nick's website, and he has like the real-time MVRV. But this, he does have a comparison. Comparison to, what am I comparing to?
No, I mean, the one graph is enough because it has both on the one graph.
Oh, it does. It's the ratio. He's got the ratio there.
Yes, it's so the ratio is something that we looked at. Essentially, you divide market cap by realized value, and obviously when it's below 1, it's below, right? But I agree with you actually that like right now it's not the bottom, and what we had at 3,200 was more of a baby capitulation, and the real capitulation is yet to come in Q1 or Q2 of 2019. Now, I will disagree with you, at least based off of your latest thoughts, that I don't think it's going to be Q2, Q3, like you mentioned yesterday, but I think it's going to be more Q1, Q2, late Q1 even, perhaps.
Well, we can talk about that, right? Because we need to talk about what you define as a bottom and what I define as a bottom, right? Because if we go back, I mean, I don't have the chart up, but if we go back to the last bear market, the price bottom came in on like January 6th, but Bitcoin didn't start an uptrend until like October, right? So it's really hard to say when the bear market ended. Based on the price of Bitcoin, the bear market ended on January 6th in the first week of the year. But based on reality, like the pain didn't end until like November, December of that set year.
Right. Yeah. So just because it goes below 1 doesn't mean that it has bottomed. Obviously, the lower it goes, the more undervalued it is. I still think that we today are in the November 2014 area, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, no, we're gonna get to price in a second.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about like the work that you've done on the realized value before we move on to what we think about the Bitcoin price projections?
Yeah, essentially, I think like if you just go back to Nick's graph once again.
I mean,
essentially,
for the long term or Nick's on here on the ratio.
Yeah, with the red graph.
Yeah, got it.
So I actually think this bear market will get pretty bad in terms of like the overall retracement. I think that 2017 was an absolute shit show of a bubble. It was a real bubble, and Ethereum, unfortunately, and all the scams that it enabled, all the IRC20 shitcoins, essentially, it has unnecessarily brought the market cap of everything way too high. And I think there will be a price to pay for that for sure. So like in that sense, as you can see, MVRV hasn't yet touched the lows to the same extent that it did in January 2015. And I think we have to. I believe we have to. And that's why I think that this is just a bounce today, right now, and we will go lower.
Yeah, no, and I obviously you and I agree on that. But since you mentioned the bubble, I want to grab one more of your charts here. Which one was it? It was this one, right? So this is a comparison of the Bitcoin bubble to the .com bubble, and a lot of people like to compare them as far as how much money was in the market cap. And some people think that we haven't had a bubble because the .com went all the way to 10 trillion and Bitcoin only went up to like 350 million. This is another chart that you tweeted out. Maybe you can give us some context. And how do you compare the 2017 crypto bubble to the 2000 .com crash bubble? Because I have whole presentations about that. I don't know if you've seen them.
Yeah, so I actually think that the 2017 bubble in crypto wasn't even the big bubble. I think the next one that whenever we top, I don't know if it's going to be 2022 or 2023, some of sort of my proprietary and statistical models that I've been working with some people on, for what it's worth, I think we're going to top in 2023. And I think that's going to be far bigger than 2017 ever was. But essentially, equity is a much more established asset class. Now, that being said, I don't think that 2017 was the year 2000, if we are making a comparison. In the world of cryptocurrency, I still think that we are probably like 1994 or something. And the big bubble is yet to come. It might be the next one. It might even be the one after that. But we're definitely going into multi-trillions for sure. Now, the value, I actually think that when push comes to shove, the cryptocurrency bubble is going to be even bigger than the .com bubble, the real one when it comes. Because there's much more money and wealth overall in the world today than there was in the year 2000. Two, the value of public equities is only 70 trillion, while the value of like broad money and all monetary media and other store of value assets in the world is like on the order of like more than 100 trillion, right? Also, that was only exclusive to like technology stocks, and money as a whole is much, much bigger. And if you include like alternative store of value assets, it's even bigger. And so I think in general, like the cryptocurrency bubble hasn't even started yet. Like that's the thing. All in all, both like everybody who's involved in crypto right now, we're still early because we've barely scratched the surface and we've barely scratched the number of adoption. If you believe that this is going to be an S curve, then like the steep part hasn't even begun yet. We're still preparing. We're still building that base.
Yeah, you and I are going to disagree on this one. I do think the full bubble has completely popped. I do think that we were here And this is why I believe that Bitcoin will reach its new all-time high in price somewhere, in 2021, maybe 2020, somewhere in that time span. Like after the next halving, I believe Bitcoin will go to a new all-time high in price. And when it does, obviously Bitcoin will have a new all-time high market cap because there'll be more Bitcoin at that time around, even by, a lot less people lose Bitcoin today than did before, right? So I do envision Bitcoin going to a new all-time high by market cap sometime within 12 months after the next halving, or maybe even before the next halving, but I doubt it. However, I see it decoupling from the altcoins. I do think that the ICO bubble and the Ethereums and the EOSs and the Cardanos, I do think that they are going to keep going down and not come back. And again, this goes to our previous look on things. You believe that all of this, some of this garbage will pump even more, creating the big bubble. And I don't. I see Bitcoin as being way more adopted. I see Bitcoin going up, kind of like the internet and the dot-com stocks going up, breaking the prior highs 15 years later. Like the internet became more and more popular with every day after the dot-com bubble. But the value on the internet took 15 years to achieve new highs. So I see Bitcoin having a new all-time high market cap within a couple of years, but the all-time high market cap for all of crypto, I see that being dragged out into 2023, 24, maybe even 2025, because it will only be Bitcoin. So like Bitcoin itself would need to reach break 340 billion, all Bitcoin, because I think Bitcoin was only like 150 of this and everything else because it was less than 50%. Anyway, that's my quick view on things. This is where we slightly differ. Any closing thoughts on your view of comparison, Bitcoin to the dot-coms? And now, otherwise, it's time to move on to our price outlooks.
Yeah, I guess we disagree here. I think money is like the second or the third biggest market in the world. Actually, the third biggest market in the world, I believe. The only market bigger is real estate, all private equity, all public and private equity, and possibly debt. But I believe that never in our lifetime will we have something that is disruptable on such a big scale. I strongly disagree that our .com has already happened. I believe that it will happen when Bitcoin directly challenges fiat currency. And at that point in time, the $10 trillion in .com will feel like child's play compared to sort of the sizes of the market.
So hold on, Murad. So we might have a little bit of a disconnect here, right? Like we're talking about a bubble, right? So when Bitcoin challenges, though, by the way, one of the best things that I liked about your interview with Pump was when you talked about how so many people around the world are using things like real estate as a store of value. Just wait till they discover Bitcoin. And I think that was probably like my most interesting thing that I was listening to in that 2-hour interview that you had with him. And I'm like, wow, Murad makes a really good point because this is probably not very good for the real estate market because all of that speculative value in real estate that it's been used as a store of value may migrate into Bitcoin, hence causing a global-wide real estate bubble. But that doesn't necessarily have to cause a Bitcoin bubble or a crypto bubble, right? Again, I'm not talking about, I agree with you. Bitcoin will challenge 10 trillion, 40 trillion, whatever. Bitcoin could grow to be, the biggest asset class by market value. The point of contention is, would it be a bubble or would it be a new asset class for the next of our lifetimes at the top of the heap? Kind of like, the bond market has been for 30, 40 years.
So here's the thing, right? Like both you and I know that Bitcoin grows in bubbles. And I think like we saw one in 2011, we saw one in 2013, and we saw one in 2017. I think there will probably still be like 3, 4, 5 more of these, right? Essentially, my argument.
Again, this is where I'm gonna slightly go the other way, because I think on the next one will actually have some scaling. So the only and scaling is not gonna, you know, throw the brakes on the next one, and all of these scammy ICOs are not gonna throw the brakes on the next one. I think if anything throws the brakes on the next one, it's going to be potentially Bitcoin not having enough privacy and people losing confidence in Bitcoin due to privacy. But it's possible that it will have enough privacy by the time the next bubble comes around. And then I can't think of what will possibly like stop it. It could actually reach some serious adoption by people where it's store of value and medium of exchange. So it's like the internet. Like the internet never had a second bubble.
But so I think you think too highly of like speculators. They aren't thinking about the fundamentals to the degree that you think they do. I think that, and in the case of previous bubble, I don't think that Bitcoin peaked because of like it couldn't scale enough. I think there were simply like the local buyers of that particular wave were simply exhausted. I always like that you bring up a point that in the previous 2014 collapse, it wasn't because of Mt. Gox or anything like that. It was simply because there were no more buyers. And I think the same thing happened there. Bitcoin, the way it spreads is like an attention virus. It's about eyeballs, and it's about that attention people give it. And I think that the two reasons that the bubble popped is because oversupply of shitcoins, which diluted attention overall, but simply the entire space as a whole, it simply exhausted its attention that it could find and accrue and absorb in that particular time period. And the next one is going to be even bigger, because the way Bitcoin spreads is you hear about it once, you say it's a scam. You hear about it twice, say it's a scam. The third time you hear about it, people start believing in it because this thing keeps coming back. And I think like the amount of collective attention that it can absorb with every subsequent cycle is going to be bigger and bigger.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you there. And by the way, I think I think my entire 1,500 live viewers and everyone else will should be shocked that you said I overestimate fundamental analysis. But yeah, okay. So here's the thing, right? I agree with you. There was nobody left to buy Bitcoin at $20,000, but at the same time, Bitcoin's utility, Bitcoin's ability to scale, and Bitcoin's actual use came nowhere near justifying the $20,000 valuation, right? So the next time Bitcoin does bubble up, and by the way, when I say Bitcoin new all-time high coming in at like 2020 or 2021 or wherever it does, that's not Bitcoin's next bubble, right? It could take another 5 or 6 years for Bitcoin's next bubble. Because remember, it took us, 4 years between the 2013 bubble and the 2017 bubble. And I think the next one is going to take a longer time span to achieve. Oh, wait. And speaking of that, I don't think this is your chart. I think this is somebody else's chart. This chart. I remember when the person first put that together. I don't remember if it was this chart or not. And I commented, hey, your cycle is probably off. There's no way in hell it'll I think it was this chart. There's no way in hell the bottom will come in perfectly on the halving. They have to be somewhat separate. It could have been a different chart. So I do like this cycle chart because it shows you that the cycles have to get spread out, because the higher it goes, the harder it is to move it. So it's very possible for Bitcoin to have its next bubble top in 2023, though I have a feeling it might even be later than that, like 2024, 2025. And by then it will have to go to over 100, over maybe even over $200,000, because the ability for Bitcoin to scale for transactions and the ability for Bitcoin to have private transactions are going to be so much better that the hype is going to be all about how Bitcoin actually is unstoppable, and it will stop itself by having an over high valuation. But I don't think that's going to apply to the shitcoins.
Yeah. I think so. It's important to know what the narrative is going to be, right? I actually don't think that the value of Bitcoin is tied to its usage as much. I think that for the time being and going forward, I think Bitcoin's value is more around the digital gold proposition, and it's more about it acting as a savings vehicle rather than like any significant like payment or settlement transactions per se. So we need to sort of saturate and win that battle first before usage is actually going to become a more important and relevant fundamental.
All right, gotcha. All right, so fundamental debate's over. Let's talk about the technical debate, because do you consider yourself a technical analyst as well?
Yes, definitely. I've been for several years. I've been sort of dabbling in the area.
All right, well, Nick, that answers your question. We're gonna go and take a look at some technicals, and we do have audience Q&A. Hopefully, we'll have time to get to that. So I pulled up a few of your charts. I also have your TradingView account up. Let's talk about some of the older ones. So maybe you can explain what you mean by this chart here and CAPI or CAPI. How do you pronounce that?
Yeah, it's just short for capitulation. But essentially, we've noticed that Bitcoin, when like right before the absolute bottom, there's usually sort of like a mini bottom, and I think that's what happened with 3,200 that we had recently. Now, this is not a predictive per se. This is just one of many fractals that you can kind of find. But this Gauss trend line that my friend PNF Target came up with, it sort of predicts, like, it's a mean reversion indicator that uses some standard deviations, some statistics, some trigonometry as well, to show like how Bitcoin is likely to move in the short term. It's particularly useful on the 4-hour daily and weekly charts. But anyways, if something like that is to play out again, and what we had, where we are right now is around October, November 2014, then if that is true, and like the Gauss is pointing us to the right direction, then it's likely that we might move to 4,600 before collapsing further. So I do potentially expect some sort of an upswing. Once again, that could be wrong. These kinds of bull flags don't always play out. I'm particularly watchful of the sort of the symmetric triangle that's kind of forming on the 8-hour in the last couple of weeks. It's right at the bottom right now, the last time I checked, but the price will probably extensively follow whichever way that breaks, in my opinion. But that's sort of the short-term view. In terms of the longer-term view, I am generally roughly in agreement with you with some minor differences. I agree that we have likely not bottomed yet, but I still assign slightly more probability to the bottom between the 2 and 3K rather than 1 to 2K, unlike you do. But if I were to predict the bottom, I would say it would probably be somewhere around 1,800 and 2,400.
All right, so let's talk about the probability since you mentioned it. I tweeted this out about 2 days ago. I'm sure you can see it on your screen. These were my probabilities. So how would you alter these in your view? So you would put more probability on a final low being in a $2,000 to $3,000 range. So you probably flip the 40 and the 20 here.
Let's put it that way. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to get rid of we fall under 1K because I generally don't think that's going to happen. I think the buyers of last resort are going to step in above those levels. But
fair enough.
I would say I would put slightly more chances of us bottoming in the low 2000s as opposed to even lower.
Okay, and what is your probability that because I threw in this chart because a lot of people think that the capitulation that we just had was the capitulation equivalent to the January one of the last bear market. And I believe that it wasn't. I believe that it was closer to the one in October, November. So what is your chances that the bottom is in because I was just on Nick's channel yesterday, and Nick thinks that it's slightly greater than 50% that we have bottomed. I don't. I think it's about maybe 30% that we have bottomed. So what do you think your probability is that the bottom is in and that you and I are both wrong? We're not going lower. We're not going to cross that blue 50-month moving average, and we go up from here.
I think I'm 85% confident that the bottom is not in. So 15%.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. And when do you think we realistically hit a new all-time high? And by new all-time high, I mean $20,000, not the next bubble top. I mean, just get to a new Bitcoin all-time high.
2020.
About 2020. So you're in that 40% camp.
But late 2020.
Yeah, well, this is why I almost split them, right? I agree with you there. Late 2020, going into 2021. That's pretty much where I have it as well. Okay, cool. So we're on the same page there. So let's talk a little more about the Gauss trend lines. Can you give us some more info on it? Is this public? Can people just find it on it? Can I throw it on one of my charts? Is this public? Is this proprietary? How do you use it? And
so this is like I went through like dozens and dozens of various sort of mean reversion indicators, and this is sort of one of my favorites. This uses like some like sine and cos waves to sort of adapt as the price moves, and it also uses sort of local standard deviations. We went through an example with the daily chart. This is more of a weekly chart, and this is actually not a zoomed out version. If you zoom out even further, you will see that this has been particularly crafted to find sort of to touch like tops and bottom.
Do you have anything published that I can click on and zoom out, or no?
No,
you don't.
But okay. So this is my friend charges a small amount for this indicator, but I will make sure that he grants you access for free, because you've also once in the past have helped me with your indicator in a similar fashion, so I owe you one. But anyways, if you apply the same Gaussian sort of approach on the weekly, and this is only like this is not a solid bottom. This is just on a wick, but essentially on a wick, this would point out to low 2000s once again. Perhaps depending on how long like the sideway lasts, perhaps like 1800, 1700, like tops. But essentially, once again, I'm looking at 1800 to 2300 type area. Okay, cool. Let's see. So let's you want to go over this chart as well? This is a 4-hour chart. The triangle you were talking about, what time frame is that on? Yeah, 8 hour. By the way, a lot of people have been praising the 8 hour in particular when using your TI indicator, actually. Really? Both on the regular candles as well as sometimes with the Heiken Ashi as well. But yeah, the 8 hour is very understudied and very undervalued sort of time frame, in my opinion. I already discussed this, but yeah, there's a sort of the symmetric triangle right now in the RSI, and I'm really sort of, we are right like in the apex of it. I'm really carefully watching over the next couple of days how will that resolve. But whether you use like Bollinger Bands or the Gauss on the 4 hour or on the daily, like we are really neutral right now. It's a really choppy area. I personally am not in any trades at the moment. I'm sort of waiting to see how the situation resolves. But yeah, the past couple of days have been quite difficult to trade, and I would suggest some of the watchers to kind of stay out of the market for the time being. Yeah, I was just thinking of pulling it up. I don't have I can probably just, I mean, I have my charts opened in another like window, but I was just gonna open up here. How do I go to my charts? I don't even know where my saved charts are. Charts, here we go. I guess this is my daily. I can flip it to an 8 hour. I really like the 12-hour chart with the TI indicator. I always thought that it's been working well.
for most of last year. But I want to flip it to the 8-hour. I just want to see what that symmetric triangle looks like that you were talking about. By the way, this triple moving average forecast is really cool. That one is free, by the way. You can just Google for it, and because I see you use a lot of moving averages. So if you just Google for triple MA forecast, that one is really good.
Yeah, so the triangle I was talking about was on the RSI itself.
Oh, on the RSI.
Yeah.
Not on the price.
Yep.
Interesting. So
there's a trend line which is like has been kind of perfect since the collapse, essentially, or well, not yet, since the November collapse, but like for a long while. And so far, it's being respected. Like if you zoom out a bit further, yeah. So there, like that whole trend line has, at least until before the show, I don't know what's going on right now, but has so far been respected. I guess like the better way to do this is to and take that all the way to November 15th. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good trend line. I guess I shouldn't draw it in the form of a triangle. I should just draw it in the form of two trend lines. Yeah, that it's a decent trend line on the RSI, and it looks like it's breaking, so that is not a good sign. But again, I think everything that happens in any market around the turn of the year should really be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. I think a lot of the TA stuff needs to go out the window between like December 15th and like January 3rd, and even going into January 15th, because such crazy things happen. Like for a trader, if there's ever a time to like walk away, though this is where a lot of money is going to be made, but it's also like I personally like trading the stable markets better than the crazy markets. And too much craziness happens between December 15th and January 15th in all markets. We saw that again in the last bear market of Bitcoin when we crashed 50% in a day on January 6th.
So let me ask you a question. Do you still believe we are going to the 5,000, 5,200 type area?
Yes, I do. But because I want to give it a couple of more days. Again, I want to give it after this weekend. Like I don't like to evaluate stuff like in this time of the year, right? Especially short-term stuff because of the crazy period that I just mentioned. So my outlook, I had this outlook from before December 15th. And like, obviously, if we crash to like 3,200, there's no way we're going to go back to 5.5. But as long as we're humming above this little blue line that I have, as long as we're like staying above this, I should probably put this back to the day chart. As long as we're above this blue line, I think everything that's happening in the last 2 weeks is just noise because of year end. So I want to give it a little bit extra leeway only because of the time of year that we're in. But if we do go under 3,500, then we're probably going to go lower in Q1. And just because we hit a price, even if we hit a price target low in Q1, it doesn't mean I'm going to call the end of the bear market. I may call the ultimate low is in. Like if we crash to $1,100 next week, the low might be in, but it doesn't mean that we're ready for a bull market. That may take another year. We may get stuck at the bottom for a year, or the opposite could be true. We could, hold 3,000 for the next 6 months, the way we held 6,000 for 6 months or more, and then eventually crash below it in like September, October, marking the low. In either way, I think the bull market is not going to start till Q4. When the price low is going to show up, I have absolutely no idea. It can be tomorrow or it could be in October.
Yeah, you know what they say, the 2018 bear market is over. Congrats. welcome to the 2019 sideways market. But yeah.
And that doesn't even have to be true, right? Because we can sometime in February we can go all the way down to 1,300, and by the summer we're back above 10K. I mean, that's possible. I don't think we're gonna close the year above 10K. So maybe we drop down to 1,300, we go above 5K, and then we stay between 5 and 9K for the rest of the year. And clearly we're in a very good position. Like, no one really knows. That's why I continue to try and do daily videos.
Yeah, I just like looking at the charts lately, I strongly doubt that we have already bottomed, because like historically Bitcoin doesn't bottom like this. Like, you need a lot of red volume. You need like those like crazy wicks down. You need a true capitulation. Like, the people are still too excited. A lot of altcoins are still way too overvalued, like in the billions of dollars. That's just completely unacceptable. Like, if that's the case, then that means this whole asset class is still locally mispriced. Like, we need a much bigger purge still, in my opinion. We need much more, pain.
All right, so this is the last chart that you published. You published this on November 20th. And I'm going to hit the play button to kind of expand it a little bit to see what happened next. And it looks like you did pretty damn well with that last publication. You pretty much reached your target perfectly, and now you're expecting an ascending triangle. But
so that's not an ascending triangle. That's just sort of the area on the curve where I thought like the bottom would be like most likely. I still think we will briefly pierce that blue line at the bottom, briefly pierce, like wick below it, but not stay below it. I think we will quickly bounce back and continue climbing slowly on top of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I got you. Oh, by the way, you can get rid of these numbers if they're in your way. It's in settings. I can show it to you.
Yeah.
I always found them annoying on my indicators. Okay, so so what is this black line along the bottom? Is that a moving average?
Yeah, that's MA234, 234 moving average on the weekly. I've only drawn it just to compare where, like, sort of to catch the wicks of the last bottom, just to see, because even though
so you custom fit some moving averages based on historical price action to pick your 204 to 34 195 weekly MAs.
Indeed, but the relevant ones here are essentially 200 and 234. So 200 was the one where like kind of the candles touched a bunch of times last time, but like rarely, if ever, closed below that area. And the 234 is where like the 2 wicks in January 2015 and I believe August 2015 touched briefly. But just to see how low we could go if things go like to the same extent. And I actually believe a wick will touch MA 234 again, but like that's my personal opinion. A bit more subjectively perhaps is the blue line that's going throughout the whole graph, and that's kind of an area, that's kind of a line that I tried to draw that connects like as many local bottoms as possible. I believe it on the daily it connects like 16 times since 2010, or rather since 2011. And just to see sort of Bitcoin monetization, because really, if you think about Bitcoin as a monetary asset, what matters isn't the tops. What matters are the bottoms. And the bottom has been climbing higher and higher and higher every year. And really, it's the bottom that you should be particularly concerning yourself with, because if we, like the way I see it, in my personal opinion, if the bottom is above 1,000 or preferably 1,200, then monetization is still intact. It's perhaps a bit slower than we would like it to be, but it still shows that Bitcoin is still monetizing. Now, that being said, I think if Bitcoin goes below $1,000, it's really not good for the industry, and it's really going to prolong some stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you there. I mean, if Bitcoin goes below 1,000, it better stay there for a couple of hours at most. Otherwise, we're all in trouble.
Right, right.
I'm with you on that one. So this is the one you published back in October. So you were with me on the big breakdown from the descending triangle. And I don't know if you, how much backlash you got on this view, but you probably saw how much I got.
Yeah, so I've been like drawing that same triangle, I believe, since August or since September. And every time I posted, like I was like publicly bearish for like months before November, right? And every time I posted something like this, I got so much flack from people on Twitter, right? And like obviously now all those people are silent, but the amount of hatred and the amount of vitriol that you get by publishing bearish tweets and bearish charts is just insane. And like this is like very interesting because this is almost like sports teams, but also like money on the line, which is like makes it like 2 or 3 times more vicious. And whenever you make a bearish call, you're essentially telling people that you will get poorer, at least temporarily. And people really, really hate that. And the people who are already accumulating at 6,300 essentially made a big mistake. But volatility and on-chain volume. I mean, I'm not going to give you any exact like details, but if I were you, I'm just saying, look at certain relationships between volatility and exchange volume and volatility and on-chain volume, because there's a lot of sort of signals that you can get from those areas in my point of view. But yeah, if you compare that sort of curve, like the way volatility and volume behaved in the previous cycle, it was clear to me that we haven't bottomed yet back in September and October. I was expecting more bearishness back then, also because of things like NVT and MVT signal and NVM, which is network value to Metcalf, MVRV that we've already discussed. I think there's a lot of value in those sort of fundamental indicators. A lot of people are skeptical about them, but I think there's an edge to be had, especially perhaps not for day trading, but definitely for position trading and for more medium-term trading when you study sort of on-chain flows.
All right, so here's my current problem, and I want to see how you're dealing with it. Bitcoin has been mimicking the past bear market, like unreasonably, like identical.
Yes.
How is it going to be different? Because it's going to be different. And this is one of the things I struggle with, right? I continue to compare the current Bitcoin bear market to the last bear market because up to this point, it's like I'm living through deja vu. And I know that somewhere I am going to be wrong. And I've been thinking of where the hell am I going to go wrong? Because so far, I just keep comparing it to what happened before and I continue to be right.
Why do you think
will happen this time?
Yeah, why do you think it's more likely than not that things turn out differently?
Because the world isn't that perfect.
Yes, I agree. But there's also an argument to be had that like collective behaviors of people are like eerily similar.
No, I agree with that, but not this similar, right? Like it's not this close.
So like I think the answer to your question would be that either we go even lower than last time in percentage terms. I believe last time was what negative 83%, right? Or
well, yeah, it depends if you're gonna use. It depends what exchange you use, and it depends if you use the intraday swing, right? Because I can tell you what the high price was on Stamp and Mt. Gox. On Mt. Gox, the high was 1,242. On Stamp, the high was, I'm doing this from memory. On Stamp, the high was 1,163, I believe. Maybe 24, 1,924, one of those two. And the low was approximately 155 on some of the exchanges. Now, the BLX, which is what you're using Bitstamp here, you use BLX in the other one. Yep, 156, that's about right. So it's so we're talking 1163 to 156, I believe that's about 87%.
Yeah, so I guess what could be different is we go even like it's going to be even worse than negative 87%. And I would attribute it to the bubble we had in 2017. And I think if the altcoins are going to keep going lower, which I actually expect as well, because I still think things like Bcash, Ripple, EOS, and frankly, even Ethereum, I think they're all still massively overvalued. They shouldn't be in the billions of dollars. They should all be below like $1. Okay, maybe in the case of Ripple, Ethereum, a couple of billion, but definitely not like at the level they are right now. And I think they can drag Bitcoin down with them because, as we've already agreed, a lot of market participants, they're not very discerning. They haven't really differentiated between these assets a lot. And as these altcoins viciously fall, it can drag the entire crypto market with it down. So that's one scenario how it could be different. The other scenario is it can just get dragged out longer. Now, everybody expects the cycle to get dragged out longer, but it could get dragged out even longer than people expect it to do, like an even bigger delta, so to speak. Either we can go sideways for a long time here and then collapse in the spring, or we can collapse in February, March, and then go sideways for much, much longer. So
right, but if we collapse in February, March, and go sideways for much lower, to me that mimics what happened before. I think the difference would be if we go sideways here into the spring and then collapse for the final capitulation. That would separate the current bear market from the last bear market. But either way, they're already different, right? And that's because of, to me, like the only thing I can say is the price action can mimic the prior bear market, but this critical 200-week moving average is already different, right? Because if we did bottom and there was not going to be, and we'll never go below 3,000, then obviously we didn't go as low and the moving average held. But once we go lower, that means we are now below the 200-month moving average. 200-week moving average, sorry. And this moving average has never dipped to the downside. So let's hope it doesn't in the future either. So I think relation to the 200-week moving average is going to be one of the big separators of the current technical picture of the bear market versus the last one.
So I have an interesting question for you. Assuming we go sideways here for a while and then drop, do you agree with the idea that the longer we stay sideways here, the higher the subsequent collapse bottom going to be?
You mean the lower the bottom's going to be?
No, the higher. Well, I'm wondering which one you think.
Right. So, okay. So here's the thing, right? The longer we stay sideways in the current market, I think you're more likely. Okay, so let me answer. I don't know how far we will dip. I think either way, I'm looking at a 50% dip, right? So no matter how long we stay sideways, whether we stay sideways for a month or 9 months, I am looking at a 50%, one more 50% drop. We just fell 50% in a matter of weeks from 6,000 and change down to just over 3,000. I am looking for one more 50% drop, and that takes us to under 2K. Now, that drop can happen in Q1. That drop can happen in early Q4. I think the big difference is that if that drop happens in early Q4, we are looking at a V-shaped bottom like the stock market had in 2009. On the flip side, if we dip 50% now, we are potentially looking at sideways action into Q4. So I think that the big difference is what happens after the big dip, but I am expecting the big dip. Murad, are you still with me? I think I lost him there. I think he's coming back. We were pretty much done. I wanted to look at a few of his other charts. Other than that, we're going to get to your Q&A and we're going to call it a day in about 20 minutes. Let's see if he comes back. In the meantime, let me look at some of your questions. And thanks, Patrick, for putting those together for me. Though they're mostly going to be for him, but if some of them are for me, I can take a look at those. Could paper trading Bitcoin influence its price discovery? I don't, not currently. Maybe in the future, but it and only short term, not long term. Well, you got his Decred thoughts. That answers that part. Yeah, I haven't had much time to work on my diet and exercise plans. Maybe next career change. I just don't have the time, unfortunately. I wanted to get it done by New Year's, but that didn't happen. Hey, Murad's back. Hey, man, you're back, still muted. But glad to have you back here.
Yeah, I'm back.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going through a couple of questions. I think we're pretty much done. Let's just wrap up the TA side. I think you heard what I had to say on my outlook. I just wanted to go through a couple of more of your charts. This is what you posted about that. You're with me, right, Murad?
Yes.
Okay. This is what you posted about that first capitulation, the baby capitulation. Yeah, I never really saw this as a head and shoulders, but maybe. And that big breakout, and then the final capitulation, and then and you followed that up with the current look, and you're still sticking to your almost 5,000 before 2,000.
I think if sort of this head and shoulders does play out, which I increasingly believe it won't, because everybody and their mother is drawing that inverse head and shoulders on Twitter and TradingView these days. So whenever that happens, something like that is unlikely to play out fully. But if we do have some kind of a breakout, I actually don't see us going higher than 45, 4,600.
Okay, and what else do I have from you? Oh, this is your update to that other chart. So yeah, you're still sticking to this scenario as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we are already seeing. I believe that chart is from like a month ago. Yeah, November 25th. Yeah, so we have bounced, obviously, from the 200 moving average. We have touched, what, 4,300, I believe. It remains to be seen whether we go higher or we just continue sideways. The last 3 or 4 days make me think that we are likely to continue sideways in the short term.
And that's pretty much the same graph, just maybe a little bit. Oh, actually, no, I don't need that one. It's literally the same graph. All right. Oh, and another link I had. Anything you want to talk about from Willy Woo's work? I know he has a lot more new stuff coming, or we can just go to QA and maybe save this for a future podcast when maybe Willy Woo will join us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot I can talk about Woo stuff and just fundamental on-chain flows analysis, but I guess better if we potentially leave that for future topics.
All right, cool. So let's do a couple of QA. We'll try to go through them fast. I know this is really lasting too long. I don't know if you want to turn your camera back on or you're saving battery power.
Yep. Just give me a minute, but I can hear you, but give me a minute to turn on the camera.
Okay, cool. So because otherwise I'll just put it on, I'll just highlight myself because we're kind of done with screen share. All right, so we got some questions from the audience. We already covered Decred. People are asking, we're going to skip the paper trading stuff. No, Murad does not like big blocks. That's very clear from his work. I don't need to ask him that. Is it possible to harden the inflation of Bitcoin, or will it always be subject to the consensus of miners and devs? How can you have faith in the immutability of the code subject to patch and upgrades? Well, I think your question is slightly misplaced. It's not subject to consensus of miners nor devs. It's actually subject to those running a node. And Hey, Murad, having some internet connectivity. You muted, so you may want to unmute, then you should be good to go.
Good to go.
How are we doing?
Good to go.
You're good to go. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop the screen share. We got you twice. I got you on the phone. Okay, cool, perfect. Let me knock out the other one. Remove that, and yes, that'll work. Remove. Yes. Okay. Anyway, that's not working on my end. That doesn't matter. Okay. So, so I think the question was incorrect. It says, is it possible to harden the inflation of Bitcoin, or will it always be subject to consensus of miners and devs? And I'm saying that it's not subject to the consensus of miners and devs. It is basically subject to the consensus of node operators. They're the ones in control. The user-activated soft fork proved it, and that's what makes it Bitcoin and makes it decentralized. It says, how can you have faith in the immutability of the code subject to patch and upgrades? Well, because I can run my own node and choose which consensus rules I'm following. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with you. Miners essentially don't get a say in the monetary policy at all. I do think that full nodes predominantly are in control, but I do think the devs have a significant sort of social say and significant sort of influence on the direction of the project, without a doubt. Now, that being said, when it comes to the inflation rate, it's definitely up to the full node runners, and it's up to them what kind of software they run. And as long as they run the software where 21 million is the limit, then that is the limit.
My other answer to this is Bitcoin is by far the most decentralized as far as the most simple as far as the ability to run a node. Therefore, this concerns me for every coin other than Bitcoin, but it doesn't concern me for Bitcoin. Okay, next question. Where are we here? Okay. Can we have a comment from Murad about the state of the Lightning Network? Does he think it can scale sufficiently to be able to buy proverbial cup of coffee?
Yeah, I mean, many people around the world are already using it to make small purchases. Now, I believe that there are a couple of unsolved problems that still remain, but given the rapid process that has been done over the last couple of years, and like the growth in the channel capacity and the amount of Lightning nodes, etc., I believe that those problems are definitely not unsolvable. And with some of the greatest minds working on LND and C Lightning, I think we'll definitely see greater and greater capabilities and capacity on the Lightning Network. I've actually been incredibly impressed with Lightning, like in the last 6 months, especially. 2018 was a breakout year for it, even though it's still in a relatively raw state. But watching Lightning development and like studying like the technicalities of it makes me feel like Bitcoin in 2013 when I first got involved all over again.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with the current progress of Lightning, even though I have not had time to set up my Lightning node yet. Okay, but I'm happy so many people have. Check out Pierre Richard's work on setting up your Lightning node. It is very, very good. Okay, so you read Saifedean's book. I'm sure you heard a lot of his interviews. I'm also pretty sure you follow Tyler Jenks's work.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So the question is, I'm not going to read the question. I'm just going to paraphrase it. What are the chances the world will the world will bring the gold standard back, or at least a critical country will bring the gold standard back?
No, I don't believe that will happen, because I think, like, right now, like, us Bitcoiners are still a relative minority relative to the world population as a whole. But Bitcoin is far superior to gold. It is much more transportable. It is much more unseizable. It has a higher stock to flow ratio, aka lower inflation. It is you can send it around the world in essentially 1 hour, something that is totally impossible with gold. You can't take billions of dollars worth of gold with you through an airport. That would never be allowed. And most importantly, historically, even before fiat currencies, gold has lent itself well to fractional reserve banking and various derivatives. And also, it is much more easier due to its physical nature. It suffers from something called the centralization in votes problem. The beauty of Bitcoin is that the majority of the problems and weaknesses of gold that I've listed are essentially solved. And Bitcoin blockchain gets audited every 10 minutes, and like, this on-chain like auditability of it is very, very powerful. I also think that fractional reserve is much less likely to emerge atop Bitcoin, and even if it does, it would be much less successful and much less sustainable. A lot of people think that gold's physical nature is an advantage, but I actually consider it a weakness. And we are moving, the entire world, the entire human civilization is moving to a digital age, and digital money is, like, perfectly appropriate.
All right, cool. Thanks for that answer. I think we got your thoughts on Decred. We're not going to dive back into that topic, but maybe we'll do another podcast where you and I debate Decred. If that's the only currency on the altcoin side you think is viable, we can definitely debate that in the future. If you like, maybe, I don't know, in a few months, we'll see how it goes. All right, next question. You think the whole crypto space is still far too complicated, expensive, and risky for the average person to be able to securely get into crypto before that required mass adoption can take place?
Yeah, I definitely think that if I were to point out 3 or 4 biggest weaknesses in the space, or like the things we need to work on, easily being able to secure your private keys and very easy intuitive custody, even for non-technical people, would probably be at the very top of that list, if not like in the top 3. I think, once again, like, as we've already discussed, money and investments and savings, they are about reducing anxiety. They are about transferring the fruits of your labor into the future. For many people, securing private keys is like kind of like stressful. However, companies like Casa Hodl and several others are working on certain like multi-signature schemes and multiple key recovery sort of like systems that are going to like make a lot of these things easier. There's definitely demand for this. A lot of people would certainly pay for this. So I think Bitcoin entrepreneurs will rise to the occasion and provide appropriate solutions. I believe all of the UX around Bitcoin will keep consistently improving, and the complexities getting abstracted away in the next 6 or 7 years.
All right, very cool. All right, let's move on. Can the monetary system of Bitcoin be the answer for the real estate bubble and the high price of the rents?
Yes. So I believe that in many cities around the world, especially big cities, real estate is like, it has a very large premium, which is much above like its use value, or like even the cash flow that it provides, precisely because of like fiat currency and a lack of like solid like investment and savings vehicles. People, especially the wealthy, they use real estate essentially as like a way to park wealth, right? And that's precisely why like real estate in San Francisco, New York, London, Tokyo is extremely expensive. Now, I believe that if the world adopts a Bitcoin standard and we have the so-called hyper Bitcoinization happening, it will actually take some of the wealth that's parked in bonds, real estate, and even stocks, and move it to Bitcoin. And I think that, of course, it's not going to take like all of the wealth parked there, but I think it could take somewhere between 5 and 15% from even those established traditional asset classes.
All right, very cool. All right, we got just a few more questions, and I'll let you go. No, I'm gonna skip the 21 million Bitcoin. That's not going anywhere in my lifetime. I think it's possible that that could be in jeopardy in like 15 years, but we'll deal with it. At least 25 years more before the 21 million cap goes into a big debate. So I'm not really too concerned about that now, and I don't want to waste brain cells thinking about it. Okay, so can you maybe summarize why you think the price of Bitcoin is going lower in 2019? Is it a combination of technicals, fundamentals, history, like in like under 3 minutes, just like a short view, why do you think we're gonna go lower?
Yeah, so like on the fundamental side, especially if you compare NVT, NVTS, and like NVM and a couple of others, I think we are still not we're still not at the levels that we saw in the past, like in the past bottom in early 2015, and I think we need to get there. I think like as of late, I actually realized that the 2017 bubble might have been even worse than many people think. And like, I just think that the problem is that even many people, definitely retail, and even many sophisticated VCs and hedge funds and investors in the space, they still don't understand like the monetary economics of these systems very well. And like that very fact alone makes me kind of bearish. Like, and that very fact alone makes me think that these coins are mispriced. As I've already mentioned, I think many alts, essentially all of them, are still very, very expensive here, very, very overvalued relative to their probability of success. Their market caps make me think at the moment that their probability of success is much higher, but it isn't. And so I think Bitcoin Cash needs to go lower, Ripple needs to go lower, everything needs to go lower. Ethereum at this point is more of a futures contract on the Ethereum developers figuring their problems out. Ethereum 2.0 at this point is essentially a brand new currency. So all of you Ethereum holders are essentially hoping that they will make a series of computer science breakthroughs, 2, that they will be a competitive store of value, and 3, that dApps are actually going to be useful in a massively decentralized setting. And so I think this needs a series of multiple miracles, which is just a much more uphill battle than Bitcoin simply focusing strictly on that digital gold use case at this very moment. And like, yeah, I think the 40, 50 billion that we have in alts right now, still way too much. It needs to go lower. And on a technical side, like the 3,200 bottom that we had is not like the previous Bitcoin bottoms. Now, you can argue that it doesn't necessarily have to be the same, but I believe we need to see much more like capitulation volume candles. We need to see like much sort of much more brutal wicks. We need to see the last waves of weak hands completely flushed away and those coins transferred to stronger hands. And I don't think I have some couple of others proprietary systems, and they are not telling me that real serious accumulation has begun yet.
All right, very good. A little longer than 3 minutes. It wasn't an easy answer, but you did well. All right. Hey, this is actually a hard question for me to answer. Let's see you give it a shot, and then I'll try. If the current bounce can't hit 5,000, in your case, 4,800, close enough. Is it more likely that bounce can occur from 2,700 Or do you now expect a straight fall to sub 2K without revisiting 5K area? I guess that's a little more of a question for me. But back to you, is it possible that we fall to 2,700, then go up to 5, then make the final low?
Yes, that's definitely possible. That's definitely a scenario that me, Willie Woo, and my partner David have been considering as of late as well. So let me get this straight. A drop to 2,700 first, then 5K, and then collapse.
Right. Let's use rounder numbers, right? Let's say if we drop to 2,500, if we drop to 2.5 thousand, is it what's your chances that we can then rally 100%, but the low is not in?
Yeah, I don't think that's very likely. I think if we're going to 2,500 from here, that would probably be like the capitulation itself.
I'm kind of with you if we can get back above 5K. I think if we can actually rally over 100% from 25K or lower, then we're not going to make a new low. But if we drop to 25 and then only rally to 4 and get rejected, I'll still be looking for sub 2K.
Interesting. So here's the thing, right? The way I see it, I don't think people or market participants think that we have already bottomed. I just don't have that feeling yet. And if they don't believe, if they don't trust the price action that we have already like had a global bottom essentially, then I just doubt that there's enough energy to take us to 5K.
Yeah, no, that's a fair statement. All right, we do have to wrap this up. Final 2 questions. Let's make them very, very short. I just saw them in the live chat. Do you think Bitcoin can fail without some technological disaster? Do you think there is anything in Bitcoin's fundamentals and not technicals that can cause it to fail? I can't think of anything. Go for it.
No, absent some like unfixable bugs, which are
well, no, but that's
like,
technological, right? No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about fundamentals, not technology.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Okay,
I guess like at worst, as we've discussed, we like 25 years from now, we might add like a Monero style fixed reward, but that's about like the only thing that I can imagine. But other than that, there's nothing that I see that will stop Bitcoin from failing. Now, I do think that in the medium term, we're more likely to see 3 or 4 dominant chains as opposed to exclusively one. But I do believe that Bitcoin will take 70-75% of the market at least.
Yeah, you and I disagree on that, but we'll save it for another podcast when we debate Decred. And final, do you see a use for blockchains and supply chains? I personally don't at this point in time. Maybe on a side chain, certainly never on the main chain.
Yeah, maybe. I think honestly, like for the time being, we should be focused on what is obviously the biggest use case for blockchains, which is money. And I think once we have that big, liquid, and most importantly, secure money in place, maybe additional capabilities can come about. But for the time being, it's important that we build secure global money. Like that's what should be on everybody's priorities at the moment.
All right, cool. Okay, so that's it, man. We've gone for almost 2.5 hours. I'm gonna briefly go to screen share only because I have to mention the Unconfiscatable conference, which it looks like Murad will be going to, not 100% confirmed, but 90% confirmed. And if he goes, he'll play in the poker game. He'll be at the carnivory dinner, and we'll get him a speaker card. We'll get him on stage to talk about some of this stuff as well. And yeah, so just a heads up, we lowered the price. It's back to 0.1. People that paid a little more than this in current tier are being refunded this week. So don't worry about that, guys. And yeah, thanks for coming on. And final thoughts, where can people find you? And what are you going to be working on in 2019?
Yeah, you can always find me on Mustop Twitter. Definitely feel free to follow me for consistent market commentary. As I've already said, me and two of my partners are launching a crypto fund in February, which is going to be like a hybrid hedge fund / VC. We're going to be investing in both cryptocurrencies as well as adjacent businesses in the space. But yeah, I'm very excited about it, and very excited to sort of dedicate my youth and my career to the digital currency industry.
All right, very cool. Hey man, thanks for joining me on this New Year's Day to kick off 2019. I got another interesting guest coming up either tomorrow or the day after. I don't want to say who it is because there's going to be a massive troll army. Sometimes it's better to just be surprised, just like today. So, hey guys, thanks again for watching. Thank you for watching my channel. Please subscribe. I don't normally even mention that. I assume people know to subscribe if they want to keep watching. And thank you for joining me. I plan to do a lot of videos in 2019. I think the Bitcoin space can still use my commentary until basically Bitcoin, everyone's using it and mass adoption comes. But until then, I'll stay with you, doing more videos, doing more content. And once again, thank you to Murad Mahmudov for joining me on this channel. And perhaps him, besides Unconfiscatable, maybe we'll bring you a video from his home country of Azerbaijan, which would be great, somewhere I really want to go. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you guys again, and see you all on the next one. Don't forget to check out the audio podcast on iTunes and everywhere else. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.